I asked where my war dog was. She smiled, said, "It's just a dog," and pulled the trigger. I hit the ground bleeding, glass in my back, while Ruger, my four-legged brother from Kandahar, was tied to her bumper in 90-degree heat with no water. But that wasn't even the part that broke me. 3 days later, I got served a restraining order claiming I was dangerous, and she'd already drained our accounts to fund her affair partner's fake business. Her lawyer? His uncle. But I had something she didn't count on. A war journal, a sheriff ally, and a revenge plan she'd lived to beg her way out of. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Jacob Mercer, and I'm 35 years old. I've spent 13 years keeping Army vehicles running through 5 deployments, working in the shadows while others chased glory. My wife Claire lives with me in our modest Missouri home, along with Ruger, my Belgian Malinois who I rescued from a bomb site in Kandahar. That dog saved a kid's life by dragging him from a blast zone, and then saved mine by giving me something to hold on to during the darkest nights overseas. I've documented every mission, every repair, every moment with Ruger in my war journal, tracking it all for VA benefits someday. Claire's been distant lately, making excuses about bad reception and being tired when she misses our calls. My stomach tightens each time her phone goes straight to voicemail. But let me start from the beginning. The drive home from the airport felt longer than my last deployment. Every familiar landmark seemed to mock the knot growing in my gut. You know that feeling when something's just off, like the air before a storm? I pulled into our driveway around 3 in the afternoon. No American flag flying out front, the one Claire always hung when I was due home. No welcome home banner like the last 4 times, just nothing. The garage door was closed, but Claire's white SUV sat in the driveway. At least she was home. My boots crunched on the gravel as I grabbed my duffel from the trunk. The weight of 13 years of service sat heavy in that bag, but not as heavy as the silence pressing in around me. Remember those old war movies where the soldier comes home to streamers and music? Yeah, this wasn't that. The house stood quiet as a tomb. I tried the front door. Unlocked. The living room hit me first. Half-empty shelves, bare walls where our photos used to hang. My throat went dry. "Claire?" My voice echoed through the house. God, I hated how uncertain I sounded. "In here." Her voice drifted from our bedroom, flat and emotionless. I found her methodically folding clothes into a designer suitcase, one I didn't recognize. She didn't look up, just kept folding with mechanical precision. Her platinum blonde hair was perfectly styled, like she was headed to a business meeting rather than greeting her husband home from war. "What's going on?" I asked, though the answer was screaming at me from every bare wall and packed box. She finally looked up, her face mask-like. "I'm leaving, Jake. I'm moving in with Trent." Trent. The name hit me like a round to the chest. Who the hell is Trent? Someone who gets me. She resumed folding. Someone who's actually here. I stood there, combat boots rooted to the carpet while 13 years of marriage crumbled around me. The account. It's been sorted, she cut in. Kurt, my lawyer, has handled everything. Lawyer. She'd already gotten a lawyer. The room started spinning, but one thought cut through the chaos. Where's Ruger? Claire's shoulders stiffened. It's just a dog, Jake. Just a dog. The words twisted in my gut like a knife. Ruger, who'd pulled that kid from the blast zone in Kandahar, who'd slept against my cot during the worst nights, who'd been more faithful than the woman standing before me. Movement caught my eye through the bedroom window. My heart stopped. Ruger was tied to a post near Claire's SUV, no water bowl in sight. His head hung low, and even from here I could see his confusion, his distress. What the hell are you doing to him? My voice came out raw. That's when I heard it, the distinctive click of my father's old .38 revolver, the one I'd kept locked in my gun safe since before deployment. I turned slowly. Claire stood there, the revolver shaking in her manicured hands. Her eyes had gone cold, reptilian. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Time slowed down. I saw her finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel waver. In that moment, training kicked in, but I didn't dive for cover. I dove for the window toward Ruger. The shot cracked through the room like thunder. White-hot pain scored my shoulder as I crashed through the glass. The bullet had found its mark, but not its target. I hit the ground rolling, glass tinkling around me. Blood trickled down my arm, but adrenaline masked the pain. One thought consumed me. Was she aiming for me or was she aiming for Ruger? Glass crunched under my boots as I scrambled to my feet. My shoulder burned where the bullet had grazed me, but I'd had worse paper cuts. Through the shattered window above, I caught a glimpse of Claire. She stood frozen, staring at the smoking revolver like she couldn't believe what she'd just done. Maybe she couldn't. Ruger's whine snapped me back to focus. He was straining against the rope, trying to reach me, confusion in those amber eyes that had watched over me through countless desert nights. The knot was tight. Claire had made damn sure of that. But my hands remembered every binding I'd ever untied in the field. 10 seconds, and he was free. "Let's go, boy," I whispered. He pressed against my leg, trembling. Not from fear. Ruger didn't do fear. From worry. For me. Even now, he was trying to protect me. I didn't look back at the house. Didn't need to. The image was already burned into my mind like a thermal signature. Claire in the window, weapon in hand, everything I thought I knew about our life together, scattered like those pieces of broken glass on the lawn. The sound of that shot would echo in my dreams for months. You know what the worst part was? The silence. No screaming, no crying, no desperate explanations, just nothing. Like 13 years meant nothing. Like Ruger meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. My truck started on the first try. Thank God for small mercies. I drove until the houses thinned out and the fields took over. Muscle memory taking me to the old quarry at the edge of town. It was where I used to come to think during ROTC days, where Tucker Duell and I would drink cheap beer and talk about serving our country. Speaking of Tucker, I pulled out my phone. 3 rings, then that familiar drawl. "Duell here." "Tucker, it's Jake Mercer. You got a minute?" A pause. "For you?" "Always." "What's wrong? You sound like you're back in Kandahar." "Claire just tried to shoot me." Silence on the line. Then, "Stay where you are. I'm coming to you." 20 minutes later, Tucker's patrol car rolled up beside my truck. He'd filled out since our college days, but those steady eyes hadn't changed. He took one look at my torn sleeve, the dried blood, and Ruger's agitated pacing, and his face hardened. "Start from the beginning," he said. So I did. The homecoming, the packed bags, the gun. When I finished, Tucker was quiet for a long moment, watching Ruger circle the trucks. "She used your father's revolver?" he finally asked. I nodded. "The one you kept locked up?" Another nod. "That's premeditated, Jake. She had to plan that part. Had to find the key, had to load it." He trailed off, thinking. "You said you've been keeping a journal?" I reached into my duffel and pulled out the worn notebook. Started it in Kabul. Figured it might help with VA claims someday. Times, dates, expenses. Even got Ruger's service record and vet visits in there. Tucker flipped through the pages, his expression growing more focused. "This is thorough, real thorough. Times of calls with Claire, money transfers, everything." He paused on a particular entry. "Wait, she cleared out your joint account last week?" "Haven't even looked. Been afraid to." He handed the journal back. "Don't lose this." "And Jake?" His voice took on that official tone I remembered from our training days. "Be careful. A story like this, wife shoots at husband, it can spin both ways, especially if she's already got a lawyer in her corner." "What do you mean?" "I mean she could claim self-defense. Say you came at her. Your military background could work against you there." The reality of it hit me like a sandstorm. This wasn't just a bad homecoming or a rough divorce. This was tactical. Claire had planned this, positioned her pieces, secured her resources, just like any other combat zone, except this time there were no rules of engagement, no clear enemy lines. Tucker studied a particular page in my journal, his brow furrowing deeper by the second. Finally, he looked up. "You may need a lawyer." 3 days after Claire pulled the trigger, the papers arrived. Not divorce papers, that would have been too straightforward. No, what landed on my doorstep was a restraining order. delivered by a deputy who couldn't quite meet my eyes. Probably knew I was military, probably felt like he was serving one of his own. I read it twice, my hands getting steadier with each line of bull. According to the filing, I'd abandoned the marriage during extended deployments and exhibited threatening behavior upon return. Claire claimed she'd acted in self-defense when I aggressively approached her during a domestic dispute. You ever have one of those moments where reality feels like it's bending, where up becomes down and everything you thought you knew just shifts? I called Tucker right away. He was already expecting it. "Kurt Sheldon," he said before I could even explain. "He's her attorney. Real piece of work. More showman than lawyer. Loves playing to the local crowd." "How bad?" "He's got connections. Sits on the Bar Association board. Plays golf with half the courthouse." "But Jake?" Tucker's voice hardened. "Don't do anything stupid. That's exactly what they want." I looked down at Ruger, sprawled across my feet like always. "They're trying to take him too. Says right here, disputed marital property. They won't get him. We've got your war journal, his service record, the vet bills in your name. Just stay cool." But staying cool got harder when I saw Sheldon in action. The preliminary hearing was pure theater. He strutted around in his wrinkled suit reeking of cheap cologne, playing up Claire's fear for the judge. Called me unstable. Said my military conditioning made me dangerous. All while Claire sat there looking perfectly wounded, perfectly innocent in her designer dress. The judge, one of Sheldon's golf buddies no doubt, ate it up. Extended the restraining order another 30 days. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept seeing Claire's face in court, that practiced look of concern. Remembering how she used to laugh at my jokes, how she'd send care packages overseas. Had any of it been real? Around midnight, I started digging. Pulled out every email, every deployment document, every bank statement from the past year. Ruger watched from his bed in the corner, head tilted like he always did when trying to figure something out. "I know, buddy," I said. "I don't get it either." Then I saw it. The withdrawals. 5,000 here, 8,000 there, all to some business I'd never heard of. Trent Warren Cosmetics, LLC. The amounts got bigger closer to my return date. The last one, 2 days before I got home, was for 12 grand. My hands were shaking, but not from anger this time. This was different. This was recognition, like spotting a tripwire in the sand. I grabbed my laptop and typed in the company name. The website loaded, all sleek and professional looking. Expensive skincare products, makeup tutorials, some garbage about empowerment through beauty. And there she was, Claire. Right on the homepage, standing next to some gym rat-looking guy with 2 white teeth and a fake tan. The caption read, "Claire Mercer, brand ambassador with CEO Trent Warren." Trent. The name hit me like a round to the chest. The website had a news section. 3 months ago, Trent Warren Cosmetics secures major investment. 2 months ago, expansion plans announced. Last month, new brand ambassador joins team. All while I was still deployed. All while she was telling me she missed me, loved me, couldn't wait for me to come home. I clicked through to the company details. The registration date caught my eye. 1 week after my deployment started. The business address was local in one of those fancy strip malls Claire always talked about. Something Tucker said earlier came back to me. Don't do anything stupid. But this wasn't stupid. This was intel. And if there's one thing the Army taught me, it's that good intel wins wars. I opened a new document and started taking notes. Dates, names, numbers. The same way I documented vehicle maintenance in Kandahar. The same way I'd tracked Ruger's training progress. Claire wanted to play? Fine. But she'd forgotten something important. I'd spent 13 years learning how to survive ambushes. The cursor blinked on Claire's image. Her smile looked different now. Calculated. Cold. Like a target. I spent the next few hours going down an internet rabbit hole that would have made military intelligence proud. Every link, every social media post, every business filing, I tracked them all. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became, and let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. Trent Warren wasn't just some smooth-talking cosmetics guru. His LinkedIn profile was thin as paper, full of vague consulting positions and sketchy startups that disappeared faster than rations and basic training. The kind of resume that screams front man to anyone paying attention. You know that feeling when you're working on an engine and suddenly all the weird noises make sense? That's what happened around 3 a.m. I found an old newspaper article about some charity gala. There was Trent, arm around Claire, but what caught my eye was the caption mentioning his uncle, none other than Kurt Sheldon, looking just as smug in a tuxedo as he did in court. Son of a, I muttered. Ruger's ears perked up from his spot on the floor. The pieces clicked together like a field-stripped rifle. Claire empties our account into her lover's business. Lover happens to be the nephew of the lawyer she immediately retains. And this business? I pulled up the incorporation papers. The listed address was a UPS store in a strip mall. My hands were shaking as I poured another coffee. The sun was coming up, painting the kitchen in that same orange glow I used to see in Kandahar. Funny how some things follow you home. They're running a game on us, boy, I told Ruger. He tilted his head, those brown eyes watching me like he always did when I was working out a problem. Back in the sandbox, that look usually meant we were about to find something nasty. I needed leverage, but it had to be clean, legal, the kind that couldn't blow back on me. Claire and Kurt probably had their stories straight, their papers lined up, but nobody's perfect, especially not guys like Kurt Sheldon. That's when I remembered something from the courthouse. While waiting for our hearing, I'd overheard two clerks gossiping about Kurt's nasty divorce. Apparently, his ex-wife was raising hell about custody arrangements. Google turned up plenty. Trina Sheldon had been vocal about her ex-husband's ethical flexibility in several local news comment sections. She'd even started a blog about navigating hostile divorce proceedings, though it was carefully worded to avoid naming names. I found her on Facebook. Professional photo, sharp business casual look, tired eyes. Her latest public post was about documentation being a woman's best friend in family court. My cursor hovered over the message button. This was risky. If Kurt found out I was talking to his ex-wife, he'd have a field day in court. But sometimes you have to step on a few mines to clear the path. I kept the message simple. Mrs. Sheldon, I'm a veteran currently dealing with your ex-husband in a divorce case. I've discovered some concerning financial connections between him, his nephew Trent Warren, and my soon-to-be ex-wife. If you're willing to discuss this, I can provide documentation. Ruger whined softly. He always could sense tension. Yeah, I know, I said, scratching behind his ears. High risk, high reward. I spent the next few hours organizing my findings. Claire's withdrawals, Trent's business records, Kurt's court appearances. The whole twisted family tree laid out in neat military precision. At 0900, my phone buzzed. A message from Trina Sheldon. Call me. There's a reason Kurt keeps locking his bottom file drawer. The Dunkin' Donuts parking lot was empty except for two cars, mine and a silver Volvo parked under the furthest light. It was pushing midnight, and the fluorescent glow made everything look washed out, like an old photograph. Ever notice how certain moments in life feel like you're watching them through tactical goggles? This was one of those. Trina Sheldon stepped out of the Volvo clutching a laptop bag like it held classified intel. In a way, I guess it did. She had that look I'd seen on too many faces overseas, someone who'd been through hell but learned to wear it well. You're the soldier? She asked, sliding into my passenger seat. Ruger in the back gave her a once-over but stayed quiet. Vehicle technician, I corrected, Jake Mercer. She nodded, already pulling out her laptop. Kurt's not just helping Claire hide money. He's been running this game for years. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up spreadsheets and PDFs. See these billing records? Double entries, client accounts that don't exist, expenses that vanish into thin air. I leaned closer. The numbers danced across the screen like coordinates on a mission brief. How'd you get these? Backed everything up during our divorce. Kurt thinks he's clever with computers. She gave a thin smile. He's not. The documents told a story clearer than any mission report. Kurt had been cooking books for years, helping clients hide money through fake businesses and bogus expenses. Claire's transfers to Trent's company weren't just affair money, they were part of a pattern. Look at these tax forms, Trina pointed. The ones Kurt filed for Trent's company. Pure fiction. And here, she pulled up another document. Claire's investment expenses, all falsified to cover the transfers. My jaw clenched. You kept all this? When you live with a snake long enough, you learn to collect venom. She glanced at me. No offense. None taken. I've handled worse explosives. The next morning, I met with my bank. Froze what was left of my accounts. Not much, but enough to show I was acting in good faith. Then I called Duell. We need to file this smart, he said, reviewing the evidence over coffee at his kitchen table. Link Claire's sworn statements to these tax submissions. Show the pattern. I remembered something from deployment, how we'd document IED sites. Every detail mattered, because you never knew which piece would matter later. Already on it, I said, pulling out my war journal. Been tracking everything since she first started acting strange. Good man. Duell started making calls. You know what's funny about karma? Sometimes it dresses up real nice and crashes dinner parties. 3 days later, I was parked outside Bistro Marcel, this trendy place downtown where Claire and Trent were hosting their engagement dinner. Didn't need an invitation to know. Claire had posted about it all over social media. Some habits die hard, I guess. Through the front windows, I could see them all dressed up, champagne flowing. Kurt was there too, probably billing someone for the privilege. Claire was wearing this red dress I remembered buying her for our anniversary 2 years back. The sight should have hurt, but all I felt was tactical focus. I watched the server I'd arranged everything with, young guy named Marcus who'd served with my unit's sister company in Helmand, approach their table. Claire was standing, champagne flute raised, that plastic smile of hers going full wattage. To new beginnings, I heard her say through the cracked window, and leaving the past. That's when Marcus dropped the envelope right next to her plate. Legal papers have a way of changing the atmosphere faster than incoming fire. I've seen IEDs take out tanks. I've seen mortars reduce buildings to rubble. But I'd never seen anything quite like watching Claire's face as she registered what she was holding. Her smile didn't just fade, it shattered. The best part? Every person in that restaurant saw it happen. Because timing, as any good soldier knows, is everything. Ruger huffed from the back seat, like he approved. Yeah, boy, I said, starting the engine. That's just the first wave. Through my rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of chaos unfolding inside. Claire's hands were shaking as she read. Kurt was already on his phone. And Trent? He was staring at the papers like they were written in a language he couldn't understand. The server dropped the envelope on the table, and Claire's smile vanished mid-toast. Word travels different in small towns versus war zones. In combat, news moves by radio chatter and official channels. Back home, it spreads like wildfire through social media and whispered conversations. The morning after Claire's engagement dinner blew up, her Instagram went private. Trent's business profile disappeared entirely. Even Kurt's law firm website went under maintenance. You ever watch dominoes fall? How one tips into another, then another, until the whole line comes crashing down? That's what happened next. First came the whispers at Claire's real estate office. Then clients started pulling listings. The cosmetics business website vanished completely. Trent's flashy car disappeared from their usual parking spots around town. Even their favorite bistro suddenly couldn't find a table for them. I watched it all from a distance, like observing enemy movements through night vision goggles. Didn't need to do anything, just let the truth do its work. Ruger and I settled into a routine. Morning runs, afternoon mechanic work at Thompson's garage, evenings going through paperwork. The smell of engine oil and honest sweat helped keep me grounded. Then came the hammer drop I'd been waiting for. The IRS doesn't play games when it comes to suspicious business dealings. They froze every account connected to Trent Warren Cosmetics, LLC. Claire's personal accounts got caught in the net too, guilty by association. Even Kurt's firm caught some heat. I remember sitting at my workbench when Duell brought me the news. The familiar weight of a wrench in my hand took me back to long nights fixing vehicles in Kandahar, where the only truth was in metal and maintenance. They're running scared, Duell said, passing me a coffee. Kurt's trying to call in favors at the courthouse, but nobody wants to touch this. I nodded, thinking how Claire always needed the best of everything. Designer clothes, luxury car, premium credit cards. Karma's expensive these days. Speaking of expensive, Duell hesitated. Watch your back. People like them, when they're cornered, they get desperate. He wasn't wrong. 2 days later, I got the letter that proved it. The VA envelope felt heavier than paper should. Maybe because I knew what desperate people were capable of. Maybe because I'd seen that look in Claire's eyes at the restaurant. The one that said she'd burn the world down to save herself. Inside was a formal notice. My disability benefits were under review. Someone had submitted anonymous evidence questioning my claims. The deployment records I'd submitted? Challenged. The medical evaluations? Disputed. Even Ruger's service history was being scrutinized. My hands started shaking. Not from fear, but from that cold fury you get when someone tries to take what you've bled for. Claire hadn't just gone after our marriage or my money. She was trying to erase my service, my sacrifice, everything I'd given to this country. "Can you help?" I asked Duell later that night. We were sitting in his garage, the kind of place where honest men could talk straight. He shook his head. "VA's federal, out of my jurisdiction, but..." He pulled out a legal pad. "I can write up everything I know. Sworn affidavit about Claire's behavior, the gun incident, all of it. Might help show what kind of person's behind these anonymous claims." I watched him write, remembering how we used to cover each other's backs in ROTC training. Some bonds don't break no matter how many years pass. "You know what gets me?" I said, scratching Ruger's ears. "She's not just trying to hurt me. She's spitting on every person I served with, every mission, every life we saved." Duell looked up from his writing. "That's why you'll win. Because you're fighting for something bigger than yourself." The next morning, another VA envelope arrived. This one was thicker, official-looking. Ruger watched me open it, his head tilted like he could sense what was coming. The first line hit like a round to the chest. "Proceeding to formal review." I let the paper fall to the table, feeling that familiar combat calm settle over me. The kind that comes when you know the enemy's made their move and now it's your turn to respond. You ever have one of those moments where the ground just disappears? Where everything you've built, everything you've earned starts crumbling like sand between your fingers? That's where I found myself that night, sitting on my apartment floor with VA papers scattered around me like shrapnel. The disability payments weren't just money, they were recognition. Proof that what we did over there mattered. That the nights spent fixing vehicles under mortar fire, the friends we lost, the pieces of ourselves we left behind, it all counted for something. I must have sat there for hours, just breathing, trying to remember what my combat instructor used to say. When everything goes sideways, return to basics. But the basics felt pretty damn far away. Ruger knew something was wrong. He always did. Remember that bomb site where I found him in Kandahar? The way he wouldn't leave that kid's side until the medics arrived? That same intensity was in his eyes now. He pressed against my leg, whining softly, refusing to go to his bed, no matter how late it got. "What do you think, boy?" I whispered, running my hand over his scarred front paw. One more fight? The warmth of his fur against my palm brought back the smell of diesel and desert dust, the weight of responsibility in those long nights overseas. We'd survived worse. Hell, we'd rebuilt engines under enemy fire. This was just paperwork and lies, and I had something Claire and Kurt didn't. The truth. I pulled out my war journal, started laying out pages on the coffee table. 13 years of entries, maintenance logs, deployment records. Each page was a brick in the wall of reality they were trying to tear down. My hands stopped shaking as I worked. This was familiar territory. Methodical, mechanical, like diagnosing a broken-down Humvee. Find the problem. Gather the tools. Fix it. The next morning, I called my old commanding officer, Colonel Matthews. Hadn't spoken to him since the welcome home ceremony. "Mercer." His voice was gruff but warm. "Been a minute, son." "Sir, I need a favor." The words felt thick in my throat. "My service record's under review. Need someone who was there." There was a pause, then. "Send me the forms. I'll have them back to you by tonight." True to his word, his letter arrived by express mail the next day. 3 pages detailing every mission, every repair job, every time our unit's vehicles made it home because of my work. He even mentioned Ruger's rescue operation, the official report I thought had been lost in the system. Duell's affidavit came next, laying out the timeline of Claire's behavior, the gun incident, everything. Clean, professional, damning. The kind of document that makes bureaucrats pay attention. I was at my workbench assembling the VA petition package when Trina called. "Kurt's getting sloppy," she said without preamble. "Left his office unlocked yesterday. The files I told you about? Got copies." My heart picked up speed. The state bar ones? Better. Found drafts of Claire's affidavits with his editing notes in the margins. Shows him coaching her to lie about dates, amounts, everything. Plus some creative accounting that would make his partners nervous. I set down my wrench. "What's your play?" Anonymous tip to the ethics committee, CC'd to every news desk in the county. There was steel in her voice. "He took my kids, Jake. Tried to make me look unstable. Time he learned about karma." The package I sent to the VA weighed nearly 5 pounds. Deployment logs, medical records, letters from my CO and unit members, Duell's affidavit. Even included photos of Ruger's service vest and the commendation he received for that rescue operation. Felt strange, reducing 13 years of service to a stack of papers. But sometimes that's all you get. The chance to let the truth speak for itself. A week crawled by. I kept working at Thompson's garage, letting the familiar rhythm of repairs keep me steady. Ruger stayed close, like he knew we were in a holding pattern. Then just after sunset on a quiet Tuesday, my phone lit up. Trina's number. "You might want to watch tonight's news." I flipped on the TV just in time to catch the Channel 5 breaking news banner. The anchor's voice had that practiced gravity they save for scandals. "Breaking tonight. Prominent local attorney Kurt Sheldon faces multiple investigations following allegations of professional misconduct and financial fraud." My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. There on screen was Kurt, trying to shield his face with a briefcase as he hurried down the courthouse steps. Reporters swarmed him like angry hornets, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Sheldon, did you knowingly falsify client documents? Any comment on the tax fraud allegations? Is it true the State Bar Association has suspended your license?" The smugness was gone from his face. His expensive suit looked wrinkled, his hair disheveled. Behind him, younger attorneys from his firm ducked into waiting cars, clearly wanting no part of his spotlight. Ruger's head lifted from his bed in the corner, ears perked at my low whistle. "Would you look at that, boy?" The segment ran through a litany of charges. Falsified billing records, destroyed evidence, coaching clients to lie in sworn statements. They even had screenshots of internal emails showing Kurt helping Claire doctor financial records for her business with Trent. I remembered the endless nights Claire spent working late at Kurt's office, claiming she needed his expertise for her startup. Turns out they weren't just cooking books, they were burning down the whole damn kitchen. The next few weeks felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. Kurt's partners voted to remove his name from the firm. The State Bar Association emergency suspended his license pending review. Local judges began scrutinizing every case he'd touched in the past year. Then came Claire's turn. The IRS audit hit her like a tornado, spreading her finances across every desk in town. They froze her accounts, including the shell company she'd set up with Trent. Her cosmetics business license got yanked for multiple violations. Even her fancy new Mercedes, bought with our joint account money, got a repo notice. You know what's funny about karma? Sometimes it works just like vehicle maintenance. You can patch over problems for a while, jury-rig solutions, pretend everything's fine. But eventually, every shortcut and cheap fix comes due. And when the breakdown happens, it's usually spectacular. The local paper ran a front-page story. Attorney disbarred, business owner implicated in financial scheme. There was Claire's engagement photo with Trent, right next to Kurt's professional headshot. Below them, a detailed timeline of every fraudulent transaction, every falsified document. Social media did the rest. Claire's carefully curated image, the successful businesswoman, the wronged wife starting fresh, crumbled post by post. Former friends shared stories of borrowed money never repaid, of Claire bad-mouthing them behind their backs. Even Trent disappeared, his phone disconnected, his apartment cleared out overnight. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Maybe because I'd spent too many nights in war zones seeing how victory and loss blur together in the dawn. Or maybe because watching someone self-destruct isn't really winning. It's just confirming what you already knew about their character. The final hearing came on a crisp fall morning. I sat in the back of the courtroom, Duell beside me for moral support. Claire looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes replaced by a simple black pantsuit that had seen better days. When the judge began reviewing assets, Claire's lawyer, some fresh-faced kid from a rival firm, tried arguing about community property, but the evidence was too clear. She'd violated every financial agreement we had, committed fraud using joint assets, even endangered my life. Your Honor, Claire interrupted, her voice cracking. Please, at least let me keep the car. I need it for work. The judge's gavel cut through her plea. Mrs. Mercer, given the evidence of your misconduct, you're fortunate to be leaving this courtroom without criminal charges. The court grants sole rights of remaining assets to the plaintiff, Jacob Mercer. I kept my eyes forward, face neutral, but I caught Claire's reflection in the courtroom window. Mouth open, mascara starting to run. For a split second, I saw the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. Then her mask slipped back into place and she was a stranger again. The judge shuffled his papers. Additionally, regarding the matter of the service animal Ruger, the judge adjusted his glasses. Given the documented history and VA certification, full ownership and rights remain with Mr. Mercer. He paused, shuffling through more papers. There is one final matter, the lakefront property in dispute. My throat tightened. That strip of land had been my grandfather's pride, a quiet slice of Missouri shoreline where he'd taught me to fish, to build, to be still. Claire had tried claiming it as part of our shared assets, even though it had been in my family for 3 generations. Based on the evidence provided by Miss Sheldon, the judge glanced at Trina's affidavit, showing Mrs. Mercer's unauthorized use of joint funds. The court finds the property's attempted transfer null and void. The deed will revert to Mr. Mercer's sole possession. The weight of 13 years lifted from my shoulders. You ever have a moment where everything just clicks? Where the noise in your head finally quiets down? I walked out of that courthouse with 2 things that mattered: the deed to my grandfather's land and Ruger padding faithfully beside me. Claire's perfectly manicured life had crumbled, but I wasn't there to watch the pieces fall. I had lumber to buy. That first night at the property, I slept in my truck with Ruger curled up in the passenger seat. The lake rippled black under a quarter moon, and I could almost hear my grandfather's voice. Time to build something that'll last, boy. Remember those long deployment nights when you'd clean engine parts just to keep your hands busy? Building the cabin was like that, but every movement had purpose. I'd wake before dawn, brew coffee over a camping stove, and get to work. Foundation first, every stone placed by hand. Then the frame, each beam measured twice, cut once. Real estate agents kept showing up, waving checks and talking about lakefront potential. I sent them packing. This wasn't about money. This was about rebuilding something honest, something true. Ruger appointed himself site supervisor, watching every saw cut and nail drive from his spot in the shade. Sometimes he'd bark at squirrels. Other times he'd just rest his head on my boot while I worked out the next day's plans. The physical labor scraped away the bitter thoughts, replaced them with muscle ache and honest sweat. You know what peace sounds like? It's a hammer striking true, wood grain splitting clean, lake water lapping at the shore. It's your service dog's sleeping breaths mixing with cricket song as twilight settles over half-finished walls. 3 weeks in, an old-timer who lived down the shore brought me a thermos of coffee. Watched you working, he said. You're doing it right, taking your time. He nodded at the cabin's bones. Your grandfather would have approved. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just building shelter. I was rebuilding myself, one board at a time. Every sunset painted the lake copper and gold, and for the first time since coming home I felt like I'd earned the view. The locals started calling me the quiet builder. They'd wave as they passed in boats, sometimes leave cold drinks or spare tools by my truck. No questions about my story, just simple respect for a man doing honest work. 2 months in, the basic structure was up. Standing on the newly finished porch, watching Ruger chase waves at the shoreline, I felt something I hadn't since before deployment. Possibility. Not the fake kind Claire chased with her schemes and dreams, but the real kind. The earned kind. I hung my grandfather's old level on the wall inside, still true after all these years. Outside, the evening air carried wood smoke and lake mist. Thunder rolled in the distance, promising rain, and somewhere down the road, headlights turned onto the gravel path leading to my property. Through sheets of rain, I recognized the cruiser's light bar. Duell killed the engine but left his headlights cutting through the downpour. I whistled for Ruger, who bounded up from the shore just as Duell made a dash for the porch. "Nice place you're building," he said, shaking water from his uniform jacket. "Though that porch could use some stain before winter hits." I couldn't help but grin. That an official police recommendation? Consider it friendly advice from a guy who's seen what lake weather does to bare wood. He had something tucked under his arm, a small cardboard box, water-spotted but intact. The rain drummed harder on the roof as Duell handed me the package. "This came to the station addressed to you, figured I'd drive it out personally." Inside was a letter with the VA letterhead. My hands went still. You know that moment when your whole future hangs on one piece of paper? "Full reinstatement of disability benefits," I read aloud, barely trusting my voice. "Permanent status confirmed. Retroactive compensation for review period." I had to sit down on my makeshift chair, just a 5-gallon bucket turned upside down. Duell leaned against the doorframe. "Thought that might brighten your evening." "Oh, and I brought you something else." He disappeared into the rain, returning with a length of aluminum pole and a carefully folded American flag. "Every home needs one," he said simply. We worked in comfortable silence, mounting the flagpole brackets despite the weather. Ruger watched from his bed, an old army sleeping bag I'd laid in the corner. The flag would have to wait until morning, but just seeing the pole standing straight against the stormy sky felt right. "You remember that night in Kandahar?" I found myself saying. "The one with the IED?" Duell paused in wiping rain from his face. He'd been stationed at a different FOB, but news traveled fast when things went wrong. "Lost 3 good men that night," I continued, surprising myself by speaking about it. "The bomb took out our lead vehicle. I was in the second working the 50 cal. The blast knocked me clean out of the turret. Lightning flickered across the lake. In its flash, I could almost see the desert night, taste the cordite. When I came to, everything was fire and screaming. Couldn't move my legs at first, thought that was it for me. Then the skinny dog appears out of nowhere, grabs my collar, starts pulling. I reached down to scratch Ruger's ears. Dragged me 30 yards to cover before the second explosion hit. Duell didn't speak, just listened. That's why I could tell him. He understood the weight of silence. Ruger wasn't even supposed to be there. He was this half-wild local dog that hung around the motor pool. But that night, I shook my head. Medics said if I'd been 10 feet closer to that second blast, I wouldn't have made it. The rain was letting up, leaving that clean, earthen smell that follows storms. After that, he wouldn't leave my side. Brass made an exception, let me train him officially since he'd already proven himself. He got me through 3 more deployments. Through the nightmares. Through coming home. I met Duell's eyes. That's what Claire never understood. He wasn't just a pet. He was the reason I made it back at all. Duell nodded once, reached down to give Ruger a gentle pat. No empty words, no forced sympathy, just quiet acknowledgement between soldiers. He understood that some debts can't be measured. Some loyalties run deeper than marriage vows. "Take care of yourself, Jake," he said, heading for his cruiser. "Both of you." I watched his taillights disappear into the darkness. Ruger pressed against my leg, warm and solid, his presence anchoring me to the present. The cabin creaked softly in the dying wind, and somewhere an owl called across the water, That night, lying on my army cot with Ruger's steady breathing beside me, I stared at the ceiling and whispered words I'd never dared speak aloud. What if I never came back? That whispered question hung in the dark. But for once, the answer didn't matter. I was here now, wasn't I? And maybe that's all that counted. Sleep came easier that night than it had in months. When I woke, the morning sun was painting the lake gold, and Ruger was already at the door, ready for our dawn patrol. Some habits you never shake, and some you don't want to. You ever notice how memories hit different when you're not running from them? That morning, watching mist rise off the water, I could almost smell the motor pool diesel, hear the constant whir of generators. But it didn't sting like before. Just felt like turning pages in an old album. My phone buzzed. Captain Reynolds from my old unit. I let it go to voicemail, but he texted right after. Heard about Ruger. Got a training position open at Fort Leonard Wood. Dog handlers. Good pay. Interested? I smiled, typed back, "Thanks, Cap. We're good where we are." More calls came over the next few days. Word travels fast in military circles, especially when it involves a war dog with Ruger's reputation. A private security firm in Texas, a K-9 training facility in Oklahoma. Each time I politely declined. "Just us now, buddy," I told Ruger, watching him chase squirrels along the shoreline. He barked once as if agreeing. The VA paperwork for registering him as my support animal was surprisingly simple. Probably helped that half my medical file mentioned him by name, the Belgian Malinois who'd become more effective than any prescribed therapy. The final form arrived on a Tuesday, crisp and official. I signed it sitting on my grandfather's old fishing spot, now my half-built deck. Remember that feeling when you finally get your discharge papers? That's what it was like, watching Ruger's official status change from military working dog retired to service animal permanent. No more questions about ownership. No more legal gray areas. Just me, my dog, and our piece of lake. The cabin was coming together, board by board. I'd wake before sunrise, coffee in one hand, hammer in the other. Ruger would patrol the perimeter, old habits, then settle in to watch me work. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the water, head tilted like he was solving some deep canine mystery. You know what's funny? The nightmares started fading. Not all at once, but gradually, like storm clouds breaking up. Maybe it was the physical labor. Maybe it was finally having solid ground under my feet, or maybe it was just time doing what time does. That morning, 3 weeks after Duel's visit, I stepped out barefoot onto the new deck boards. The wood was still raw, not yet stained, but solid. Grandfather used to sit right here in his canvas chair, rod in hand, telling me stories about the base that got away. Now it was my turn to make memories. The flag caught the morning breeze, snapping softly against its pole. Ruger sat beside me, alert as always, but relaxed. We watched a heron glide across the water, wings barely skimming the surface. "What do you think, boy?" I asked him. "Should we try our luck fishing?" His tail thumped against the deck. That's the thing about dogs. They don't care about your past, only your present. And right now, our present was pretty damn good. The morning sun warmed the rough boards under my feet. I could feel every grain, every knot in the wood. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine revved. Sounded like Claire's SUV, that distinctive whine in the transmission she never got fixed. For a moment, my shoulders tensed. But you know what? It didn't matter anymore. This was our home now. Our peace. Let the engines rev where they may. The engine sound faded into nothing. Just another ghost trying to rattle chains that didn't bind me anymore. Funny how the mind plays those tricks, turning random noises into the footsteps of old battles. But I wasn't that soldier anymore, jumping at shadows. Word had come down through Duel last week. Kurt Sheldon's disbarment was final. No appeals, no backdoor deals, no second chances. 30 years of practicing law, gone in a flash of karma. His name vanished from the firm's letterhead overnight, like he'd never existed. The local paper ran a small piece about ethical violations and financial impropriety. But the real story spread through whispers at coffee shops and grocery stores. Everyone loves watching a big shot fall. Claire didn't fare much better. The IRS audit hit her like a tornado, spinning out everything she'd tried to hide. Bank accounts frozen, credit cards canceled. Even her designer handbag collection went up for online auction. Last I heard, she was selling her SUV, the same one she'd once tied Ruger to just to cover court fees. Trent disappeared first, of course. Rats always know when to jump ship. "You know what gets me?" I said to Ruger as we watched the sunset paint the lake orange. She could have just talked to me. Could have said she wasn't happy, wanted something different. He tilted his head, those amber eyes full of more wisdom than most humans I knew. But she had to make it hurt, didn't she? The cabin was coming together nicely. Every weekend brought new progress. Fresh timber for the roof, stone for the fireplace, windows that caught the morning light just right. I'd learned more about construction in 3 months than I had in 35 years of living. YouTube University, plus some help from the guys at the local hardware store. They started calling me Cabin Man, always eager to hear what project I was tackling next. You remember those old war movies where the soldier comes home and builds something with his hands? Always seemed like Hollywood nonsense to me. But there's something about working with wood and stone that settles the soul. Each nail driven, each board placed was like stitching up an old wound. The flagpole went up last Tuesday. Nothing fancy, just a simple aluminum pole set in concrete. But when that Stars and Stripes caught the breeze for the first time, something in my chest loosened, like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. I found Ruger's old collar while unpacking some boxes from storage. The leather was worn soft from years of desert sand and midnight patrols. Teeth marks scored the edges, from the time he'd yanked free of a Taliban fighter's grip. That collar had seen more combat than most soldiers. Didn't feel right just storing it away. So I built a simple shadow box, lined it with dark blue felt, and mounted it in the cabin's entryway. Below it, I placed his service record, the official one, listing every life he'd saved, every mission he'd completed. A reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes walk on four legs. The lake stretched out before us, mirror smooth in the evening calm. No sound except crickets tuning up for their nightly concert and Ruger's steady breathing beside me. From our porch you could see clear across to the far shore, where my grandfather used to point out eagle nests in the tall pines. "Place doesn't look half bad," I said, running my hand along the fresh-cut railing. "What do you think, boy?" Ruger's tail thumped against the deck boards, his seal of approval. The flag rippled overhead, its shadows dancing across the new pine boards. Strange how a piece of cloth could carry so much weight, so many memories. But that's what symbols do, I suppose. They hold the things we can't put into words. Claire was gone now, moved 2 states over according to town gossip. She'd slipped away without goodbyes or explanations, leaving behind a wake of broken promises and emptied accounts. But sitting there with Ruger, watching the sun sink behind the trees, I realized something. She'd never really had any power over me. The only power she had was what I gave her. The flag snapped in a sudden breeze and Ruger's ears perked up. But there was no tension in his posture, no alertness to danger, just peaceful vigilance, a guardian at rest. It wasn't just a dog. It was the last honest soul I had. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.